I will speak today, and thankfully for this opportunity, on how our city dealt with the hateful act without bombings and turmoil. I begin by saying what a pleasure it is to be back in Birmingham. I've been here many times. My last visit was at Mayor Bell's invitation in 2013 with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I was honored to speak for the mayors of our country in the church, where hateful bigots killed 4 precious little girls. And I want you to know, Mayor Bell, I said to myself I had to make that moment here meaningful. I wrestled with what I could do back in my community and challenged our police chief, and we developed a new program that I'll tell you about in a few minutes, honoring those 4 precious little girls and the fact that their memory must continue to be in our hearts and our souls as we work to make our country more just. If I say thanks, great to be with my friend Bishop Baker, you would expect me to say that. But let me explain. I'm a Roman Catholic. I was baptized in the Cathedral Church in Charleston. I live 4 blocks away from the church. I'm a Eucharistic minister and a lay reader. City Hall is 3.5 blocks away from the church, the bishop's house, and the church offices. And so Bishop Baker is a very dear friend, and he's such a gentle shepherd. His presence in our community, in our state, was so rich in its offerings to Roman Catholics and to all the people, as evidenced by his marching with us the last mile of that 100-plus mile march to the state capitol. I learned when we had a terrible hurricane, the worst hurricane in our city's 500-year history, that a principle that disasters catch you where you are. If you're not ready at that moment, it's too late. The Bible tells us that death comes like a thief in the night. If we're not ready, it's too late. A dear friend's wife died young, and I saw something she had on her desk that now is taped to my desk. Live every day like it might be your last, for one day it will be. So when a crisis comes to a community, if you haven't been getting ready, it is too late. I got into this line of work in this way. I was a child of the South. I grew up in a completely segregated society. Schools, public places. And as Ralph McGill, the editor of the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, wrote decades ago, Martin Luther King did as much for white Southerners as he did for black Southerners, for he exposed white Southerners of goodwill to their consciences. So as a young man, I became, as many of my friends, imbued with the felt responsibility to advance the cause of civil rights and human understanding. And that's why I ran for mayor. I was 32, had been in the legislature, been active in the legislature. I introduced the first bill to honor Dr. King, for which people sent me letters saying this just affirms that you are indeed a communist, because anybody who supports Dr. King is a communist. But white business leaders and African American leaders urged me to run so the city would avoid a bitter, polarized election, and someone who could build bridges within the community. And that's why I ran. I told my wife, I said, honey, I'm only going to serve one term, and which I really was so, I don't know, I thought I could do it all in a term. I'm a slow worker. We will celebrate our 50th year of marriage this summer, so we're still married, and she's forgiven that. But the work of building bridges in the community, and the bridges are those bridges of thousands of strands of affection and respect to tie people to each other. And it's like any relationship with your spouse, with your children, with your siblings, with your friends. It's that in building that relationship, you never put it to bed. You never forget about it. For you want to enhance it and reinforce it. And when there's slights or hurt feelings or misunderstandings, you work to repair that right away. Well, so is the case in a city. And I knew as a young mayor in 1975, 76, that there was a lot of work to do. And I had to work quickly and affirmatively. We worked in the neighborhoods to build affordable housing and restore playgrounds that had long been abandoned. I worked to bring in people of color into the government. And you know, we didn't run anybody out. Those who had been positions of power and influence, we just made the table bigger. This is for everyone. Just kept including. I put a portrait of Dr. King in my office. We one of the first cities in the South to declare a holiday, not just a holiday, day off, honor Dr. King. And I had an African-American supporter, a dear friend. He died, sadly, at 90 a year ago. He came to see me in the early months. He said, Joe, you're doing too much for black people. This is an African-American. He said, you're doing too much for black people, and it's hurting you politically. And I said, Herbert, don't worry. I said, I respectfully know what I'm doing, but there's a lot of work to be done, and it has to be done now. And I was called behind my back LBJ. That stood for Little Black Joe. You know, Little Black Joe, all he cares about is getting black votes and all that kind of stuff, which wasn't the case. But this is what I knew. And this is in leadership and in life, you seek to understand the hearts of the people. And then you respond to that. So I knew the hearts of the people who were upset with my aggressive actions because it was change. I knew that when they began to see progress and have the pride of racial progress occurring in their community, that they would welcome it. I had a police chief to fill. I appointed an African American. Not because he was African American, he was the best applicant. But that caused a lot of unrest in the community. You know, here he goes again. But he was excellent, and I knew that guy, Chief Greenberg, he's now deceased. He was black and he was Jewish. People thought I was overdoing affirmative action, but it just so, you know, it's coincidental. And I didn't even know he was Jewish when I was picking him, but certainly was interesting. But I knew that he would open more doors than I could, and he did. Because it was the first African American in a position in our region or state's history that had a job that directly affected everybody, and that is the safety of their children and their neighborhoods. And the community fell in love with him, just kept opening the doors. We had to deal with the challenge of police-community relations. We had in the department I inherited what were called thumpers. They were rough cops who would beat people. We got rid of them. It wasn't easy. They had a lot of friends. And then we started this principle of if force is used in anything, if it's somebody who's intoxicated and you have to use some force to get them, into the jailhouse, then that police officer has to file a report. And that use of force is investigated. Now, I did two things. First of all, for the police officer, there's a fresh report current with the action of what he or she did, which usually, overwhelmingly, was correct. But 6 months later, when the person who was intoxicated brings a lawsuit or something like that, you got fresh evidence from a quick investigation. But on the other hand, for the police officers, it helped them know that their duty to respect, and that's in the oath every police officer takes, respect all people and act appropriately was paramount, and that their actions would be scrutinized. And that almost overnight reduced the angst in the community about untoward, unfair police activity. And then we kept moving. We developed a wonderful neighborhood police system. And CAT teams, we call it community action teams, they weren't to go in just to knock out the drug dealers. They would go in to become the neighborhood friends. They got to know the people. The people loved them. The cops were their friends. I was in there one time and saw these little kids of color running up and hugging this white cop, Sergeant Likes. I mean, everybody loved him. He was an important part of the community. And then we started summer camps run by the police officers for kids of the inner city or socially and economically challenged neighborhoods and other parts of the city, run by the cops. So these kids from 5 to 9 on on summer evenings, when that's kind of an idle time, they would be with police officers going to all kind of events, learning all kind of wonderful things, seeing things they've never seen before. And then at graduation, they get a graduation certificate. And you know what happens? These kids go up and hug the police officers. They're their mentors, they're idols, they're their friends. So we removed that kind of concern. And we developed, and then the program that we developed, a result of my trip here, at your wonderful mayor's invitation, the problem of recidivism. We just, we did some stuff, but that revolving door, and these people that are just so hardened criminals, you let them out, whatever, they're going to get back in, they're going to cause trouble, they're going to hurt somebody or hurt themselves. And so we found this wonderful, I call her our Mother Teresa, woman who had always been interested in the mental processes of criminal behavior. So it's this great program. We've raised money, got judges working with us and all of that. And so what she does, she goes into the prison. They have to volunteer. They stay in the prison. And then so many hours a week, she meets with them, is a part of revising their moral compass. They don't know right from wrong. They haven't They never learned it when they were a child. And then, after they proceed through that, then we let them work half days in city work, supervising, and then they graduate. And these people are solid now. I saw one at an annual Christmas party we have for our employees, and he came up to me. You never think of these hardened criminals really having lives, you know. And he said, Mayor Riley, I now can go visit my grandchildren that live about 60 miles away. You know, never think of these people having grandchildren or anything. Anyway, we kept all the bridge building and everything that we could do and stayed at it. Building, we even got a new, wonderful police community relations program that will be a national model, I promise you, called Illumination. It's fabulous and take a long time for me to tell you about it. So, at 9:00 p.m. on June the 17th, after being welcomed in to Bible study on the first floor of Emmanuel AME Church, when a hateful bigot pulled out his gun and killed these people holding their Bibles to start a race war. His seeds of a race war fell on rocky soil. It wouldn't work in our city. His hateful act, in terms of his intention, completely failed. Of course, everything I knew, I got the call from the police chief, had to be perfect, notwithstanding all our work. It would be the hardest time in the lives of all touched by those beautiful 9 people and in our community. A few important things that we did. One I mentioned last night. I was in Bermudas. It was after 9, home, summer, hot. Put on a suit, tie, fresh, because I knew the clergy coming to that church at 10 o'clock at night would be dressed. I wanted everyone in the community to know that I respected that church in every way possible. There was a bomb threat and all of that, so there was a delay in us being able to communicate. We met with the family at 11:15, and the city had in place this wonderful family outreach initiative. 150 people in this hotel around the corner, about 2 blocks. And they didn't know what had happened. They just knew their loved ones were at a Bible study and there'd been some shooting. So we had to, and the chief was the investigator, he with me, stood there and said that 9 people had been killed. Every human being expresses grief in a different way. So there was this choir of sorrow, wailing, crying, yelling, sobbing. That will be with me as long as I live. What we told the family was this: we'd find this hateful person, which was important, and we did in less than 15 hours. and that he came with hate, and that we in this community would respond with love. We would take care of each other. We would take care of them. And we would pray. And we did. And then at 1:40, we had our press conference. And, I didn't think then many people would be watching because you know what was going on, but the news had that at a little after 9, there had been a shooter in Mother Emanuel Church. But what was important, I told the community, the chief and I did, that this was a hate crime. Nothing was being swept under the rug. Awful thing. Second thing I told him was this guy came from 110 miles away. He wasn't from Charleston. He was from America, which is why we're here today. He didn't come from another planet. And then I told the citizens, told them we would catch him. And then I told them that we would respond to this with love. We would reach out to the family and would reach out to each other. And the next morning, before the sun was up, there were white and black people in front of that church, weeping, holding hands, hugging each other, tears streaming down faces, with just complete love and total, without regard to anything about color or anything. The hearts were broken. We quickly knew that we needed to give people something to do. When you have somebody die next door, what do? You've got to take them some food or whatever, So everybody wanted to do something, so we quickly created a fund. Just a few hours in that morning so everybody could start giving, and then the family would know that they were giving, and we just never let up. We took care of every family need, which was very important that the community knew that the families were being taken care of. Every probate, every funeral expense, every whatever it was, we took care of everything. As I told them that night, we would love them and we'd take care of them, and the community did it too. And the outpouring of funds and all of that was extraordinary. And it continues. We're announcing today in the paper in Charleston the scholarship that was raised to generous people from away, $3.2 million to help children of the members of the church, children of those who were killed, children of color in our community for years, $3.2 million. Now, what do we need to do? For we haven't reached the goal yet in America. This was one person, but obviously he had some friends, he got some information from somewhere, whatever, filled with hate and bigotry, and that does exist. So much less than it did, and we're making progress, but we can't, this is a relationship we can't put to bed as Americans. We have to keep on it, and because the damage that it does, whether it's economic disadvantage or whatever. So one thing we're doing, and I will close with this, and it's not in response to June the 17th, I've been working on it a long time, and that is to build the International African American Museum. Now, quickly, I know you say, well, we've got museums, and you do. The most wonderful civil rights museum here that is so inspiring to me every time I come. In Birmingham, we had the museum under construction. In Washington, I was at the groundbreaking. But see, we have a real fault line in America. And that is that we do not know African American history. And until we do, all of us do, then we have a problem. And we don't know African American history because it's been written it was America's original sin. So you didn't talk about it, slavery. You know, Civil War was over, there was revisionism galore, and so that we don't know that. Well, in Charleston, that's why I started working this many years ago, when I discovered this, where I'd lived all my life, but I didn't know 44% of all enslaved Africans who came to North America came to Charleston. And when I read this wonderful book, Slave's Family, you know, their experiences, where they came from, the Middle Passage, the life as enslaved people, the reality of the harshness of Jim Crow, and so much more. We don't know that history, we as Americans. So it has to be told where it happened. So that's what we are doing. And amazingly, when you work hard, sometimes you get lucky, or the Lord extra looks out for you. So we were able to find where the original wharf was. And miraculously, it had been wharfs and all and different stuff, but nothing was on it. So the city bought it back. So the museum will be built over the site of what was Gadsden's Wharf. In the last 3 years of the international slave trade, 70,000 enslaved Africans came to that spot to be sold. Some taken around in New Orleans. And so what we will be able to do there, it's the Ellis Island equivalent, although different because those who came through Ellis Island were free. But it's a place in America that we at least will know has been honored, and flowing from that will be history. We will do a curriculum for kindergarten to the 12th grade, and it will be online. And it will get into schools in our state and in our country. For you see, when we study American history, we know about the Mayflower, but we don't know about those 882 slave ships and what it was like. And then for people of African descent to know what the cultures were from which those people were stolen. They were rich, amazing, creative, ingenious, built things, and so much prideful ancestry that America doesn't know, of all colors, don't know that. We're going to help people be able to trace their roots back to Nigeria, where the Archbishop is, or other places in Western Africa, to find their roots, and so much more. It will be enriching and inspiring. I work on it every day. I'll be working on it this evening, flying back home. We get all the money raised. It'll open in the late fall of 2018. And so in one response to that bigoted act of June the 17th, and a continued response to those 4 precious little girls, and all the injustices and all the harshness and all the evil that has occurred in our country because of slavery and its antecedents. We will create a place that can allow for healing and allow for Americans, all Americans, to better understand who we are. Thank you very much.